Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In these sessions, we will learn about the culture and communications, cultural diversity. And the objectives of learning culture and communication diversity are the students can center on fostering understanding, respect, and effective interactions among people from different cultural backgrounds. As the introductions, we will also learn about each communications process has unique characteristics in each society. Those characteristics give every person a special trait in society, a specific behavior, and a specific kind of style in different situations. Each person reflects his values during the communication process as well as his approach to building relationships with other people. And the character of each person determines the styles of communications. For example, individual characteristics are determinant of whether the speech of certain men will be reserved, open, nervous, short, or long. The significance of the style of communications is quite simple. It is a necessary tool to perform successful communicative acts, to create relationship with the communicators, to choose different ways to solve the problems. And also, the effectiveness of cross-cultural communications in the modern world depends on the level of utilizations of all its components, the most significant of which is the communication style. Styles of communications differ in different cultures. The most commonly distinguished four types of verbal communication styles are: first, direct and indirect style; second is the correct, tight; third is personal and institutional, and then the last one, or the fourth one, is the high context versus low context. And according to Edward T. Hall, the American anthropologist and cross-cultural researcher, during the 1950s, he worked for the United States Department at the Foreign Service Institute, or FSI. He taught the intercultural communication skills to foreign service personnel and developed the concept of high context culture and the low context culture. And Edward Hall also believes that knowing the characteristics of high and low context cultures is a key aspect for a successful conduct of communicative acts. The name of the theory itself tells that the most important factors in his theory is the context. The context itself is an extension of the background, the system, and circumstances in which there is an ongoing communicative act. In this context, we are going to learn about the high context cultures and also the low context cultures. In high context cultures, it represents relational, collectivist, intuitive cultures, meaning that people are part of these cultures have their primary focus on the relationship between people. And also, in this context, it creates the confidence is one of the most important steps to achieve any successful communications or to have a success in the case of the business world. And in high context cultures, according to Hall, require a group compliance. And it also requires rationality plays for a far smaller role, and context also plays a dominant role as opposed to words. And facial expressions, behavior, the way you stand, sit, talk, are saying far more in these cultures than many communicative acts with the representatives of these cultures. Meanwhile, in language is decorated with expressions that are considered redundant in everyday speech, and apologies are often encountered. Meanwhile, in the low context cultures, it gives the priority to individuality, readiness for the actions, the continuity, and also the logics. This means that representatives of these cultures prefer facts, logics, and also directness. And resolving problems in low context cultures is done through exposure of facts and also the evaluations. Decisions in these cultures are based on facts, not an arbitrary feeling of facts. And in low context cultures also, all the communicative interactions and with a completed work and the participants in the conversations are direct and precise. Their discourse is not rich with linguistic redundancies. And business circles prefer this kind of communication because documents contains no excessive meanings and linguistic labyrinths that blur the meaning of the content itself. Conflict between high versus context cultures. In the event of a conflict between high context and low context cultures, representatives of high context cultures do not confront the use of vague language that is not direct, and it is assumed that participants in the conversation should understand the importance from context itself. On the other hand, representatives of low context cultures are direct. They use logics and rationality in the discussions, or use objective truth as a way to get a truth in a linear way. In contrast, high context cultures neglect rationality and rely on non-linear processes in order to get the truth. And according to Geert Hofstede's theory, he proposed that the theory of collectivist and individualist cultures, which is largely compatible with Hall's theory. The essence of this theory is that high context cultures are collectivist cultures, while low context cultures are individualistic. And the attitudes towards people in high context culture is often determined by the society's opinion of the subject's family, while personal achievements play a smaller role. And the low context cultures are individualistic, appreciate the achievements of the individuals. Society expects them to be independent, to take care of themselves, and not depend on the help of others. And here, so we can see the differences between individualism and also the collectivism. First, the individualism. Everyone is supposed to take care of him or herself and his or her immediate family only. I here, the subject I is consciousness and right of the privacy, speaking one's mind is healthy, others classified as individuals, personal opinion expected, one person, one vote. Transgressions of norms leads to guilt feelings, and languages in which the word I or the subject I is indispensable. And the purpose of the education itself is to learning how to learn, and task prevails over relationships. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, people are born into extended families or clans which protect them in exchange for loyalty. And subject we here is the consciousness. Stress on belonging, harmony should always be maintained, other classified as in-group or out-group. Opinions and votes predetermined by in-group, and transgressions of norms leads to shame feelings. And language in which the word I or the subject I is avoided. And the purpose of the education itself is learning how to do. And relationship prevails over task. Here, the individualism-collectivism index. For the highly individualistic cultures, the individuals take care of themselves and their immediate family first, and the autonomy of the individual and the self are most important. This is for the characteristics. Meanwhile, for the highly collectivist cultures, the individuals work for the good of the group and they suppress their identity for the benefit of the group. The needs of the group come before the needs of the individual. And for the example cultures, to the highly individualistic cultures, for example, the United States, Australia, Great Britain, Canada, Hungary, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and Italy. Meanwhile, for the highly collectivist cultures, Guatemala, Ecuador, Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Costa Rica. It is according to Hofstede et al. 2002. And this is the contrasting values, the individualist and collective cultures. First, for the individualism, it is independent control, goals for oneself, competitions with others, uniqueness is valued, private self-knowledge, direct communications, consistent self in all situations, and prefers to work alone. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, relational with group, sense of belonging, duty to group, harmony with others, advice sought from others, self-alters according to the context, hierarchy important, prefers working in group. Okay, and this is the individualism versus the collectivism. First, is the caregiving. In individualism, everyone is supposed to take care of him or herself and his or her immediate family only. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, the people are born into the extended families or clans which protect them in exchange for their loyalty. And for the communications, the individualism speaking one's mind is healthy, while in collectivism, harmony should always be maintained. And for the consciousness, the subject I is the consciousness in individualism. And for the collectivism, we or the subject we is the consciousness. And for the educations, in individualism, the purpose of education is learning how to learn, while in collectivism, the purpose of the education is learning how to do. And for the group identity, in individualism, so they learn about the right of the privacy. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, the stress on the belonging itself. And then for the language, in individualism, language is which the word I or the subject I is indispensable. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, the languages in which the word I or the subject I is avoided. And for the opinion, individualism, personal opinion expected one person and one vote. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, the opinion and votes predetermined by in group. And for others, others classified as individuals for the individualism, meanwhile others classified as in group or out group in collectivism. And then for the task orientations, the individualism task prevails over the relationships, meanwhile for the collectivism, the relationships prevails over task. And for the transgressions, the individualism itself thinks that the transgressions of norms leads to guilt feelings, while transgressions of norms leads to shame feelings in the collectivism. And here is the key differences between individualist and also the collectivist societies. First, the everyone grows up to look after himself or herself and his or her immediate family only. And for the collectivists, the people are born into extended families or in other groups that continue protecting them in exchange for the loyalty. And also for the individualists, we can see that the children learn to think in terms of I and then individual ownership of resources, low context communication prevails, and media is the primary source of the information, and self-actualizations by every individual is an ultimate goal, and occupations mobility is higher, and task prevails over the relationships, and individual interests prevail over the collective. And the per capita GDP tends to be higher. Meanwhile, in collectivists, we can see that children learn to think in terms of we instead of I. And also, resources should be shared with the relatives, not the media itself. And then high context communications prevails. Social networks are the primary source of the informations. Harmony and consensus in society are ultimate goal. Occupations mobility is lower. Relationship prevails over task. Collective interest prevail over individual, and per capita GDP tends to be lower compared to individualists. We can see also there are two pictures here, the individualism and also the collectivism. In the individualism, there is only one person. Meanwhile, in collectivism, there are two persons. And in individualism, they think only for me. Meanwhile, in the collectivism, we can see two people talking about we, so they tend to help each other or they tend to lean to each other. Here is the cultural differences in personality between individualism versus collectivism. For the individualism, they focus on what you want. So you here, or the subject you, can be extended or can be replaced by subject I. Minimize role of others in self behaviors. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and use self-descriptive traits to describe itself. For example, dependable. Meanwhile, for the collectivism, it emphasizes on interconnectedness of group. The goal is to fit in, to promote group harmony, and the nail that stands out gets pounded down, and use interpersonal roles to describe self. For example, the daughter, the father, the son, and else. We can also see here there are two pictures with different conversations. The picture one is the individualism. So the father said to the son, you must learn to think for yourself. Meanwhile, the other one, for the collectivism, the father said to the son, you must do what is best for the family instead of themselves. We can also see there are 4 pictures, so there are 4 people. In individualistic, the culture encourages autonomy, so they tend to learn for themselves, they tend to think about themselves. Meanwhile, for the individualistic here, so we can see on the pictures, so there are 4 pictures, also talk about the self-reliance. Okay, for individualistic cultures, so individualistic cultures are those that stress the needs of the individual over the needs of the group as a whole. For example, in this type of culture, people are seen as independent and autonomous, and social behavior tends to be dictated by the attitudes and the preferences of the individuals. The cultures in North America and Western Europe tend to be individualistic. And a few common characteristics of the individualistic cultures include, first, individual rights to take center stage. Second is independence is highly valued. The third is being dependent upon others is often considered shameful or embarrassing. And fourth is people tend to be self-reliant. And individualistic cultures, people are considered good if they are strong, self-reliant, assertive, and also independent. This is the traits of individualistic cultures. We can see the uniqueness, the autonomy, independence, and also self-sufficiency are the most common goal for the individualistic itself. Meanwhile, for the collectivism itself is a system that values the group more than the individual. Under the system, the ruling authority arbitrarily sets common moral, social, and economic aims, and to achieve those aims dictates the standards and rules by which individuals live and work. And collectivist creed is often promoted in terms of idealized outcomes, social justice, security, and economic equality. Achieving these outcomes, however, requires the progressive destructions of Western civilizations, traditions of human and economic freedom. For a collectivist system to succeed, individuals must lose the inalienable right to life and liberty, including the freedom to pursue their economic interest. And progressivism, socialism, statism, social welfareism, fascism, communism, totalitarianism, Nazism, and Marxism are various forms of collectivism, and all are tyrannies against the individuals. Here is for the collectivist patterns. The children are taught that they are a part of a circle of relations, and this identity as a member of group comes first, summed up in the South African idea of Ubuntu, or I am because we are. Here is, we can see the picture, so there are 3 people, the son and also the father and also the mother. The mother or their parents talk about, what about your future and who will marry you, when the son said, I want to live my dreams. Here also the picture, the collectivism and also the individualistic. We can see individualistic, so they learn and also they work for themselves. Meanwhile, the other picture tell us about the group work or the people who work in a group. And for the individualists and also the collectivists, we can see the individualists, the success is achieved by each individual, as we can see on the previous picture. And individual responsibility is great, helping is low, and personal space is highly appreciated. Meanwhile, for the collectivists, the success is a result of group effort. Individual responsibility is low, helping is high, personal space is much closer, and families live together. And also here is the keywords and the themes for the collectivists and also the individualists. For those who are going to have a future research about the collectivists and also the individualists. For the collectivists, we can see the keywords or the themes: forgiveness, community attempts to forgive shooter, community sees the shooter as shooter's family as victims as well, focus on environmental or societal factors as cause of shooting. Meanwhile, for the individualists, so we can see on the keywords or the themes that the community does not intend on forgiving shooter, and the community does not consider shooter and shooter's family to be victims, and focus on individual as cause of shooting and negatively labeling the shooter. And here is the common good between individualists and the collectivists. So we can see there are several things that are common or common share for the individualism and also the collectivism. We can see the rule of law, public property, private property, economic equality, economic freedom, cooperations, individual rights and the freedoms. Meanwhile, for the individualism, they have self-interest and also the competitions. And for the collectivism, they have collective responsibility, adherence to the collective norms, and also collective interests. And this is the end of our class today, and hope to see you in the next sessions with the cross-cultural understanding class. And then I close it. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.